Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring a truly fascinating intersection, right where the deep, intricate complexities of human psychology meet the cutting-edge capabilities of artificial intelligence. Now, we often think of mental health and advanced technology as existing in two totally separate universes, right? Like one requires deep, nuanced human empathy, and the other just relies on cold, hard data. But as we're going to see today, these two worlds are colliding in ways that could fundamentally change how we diagnose and support mental well-being, both in our everyday lives and directly in the workplace.
Okay, let's dive right into this by addressing one of the absolute most pervasive myths out there. Is mental health simply a binary state? Like, are you either completely healthy or completely ill? We so often view mental well-being through this rigid, black and white lens, kind of treating any struggle as a sudden failure or some sort of weakness. But that framework, it's not just incorrect, it is actively preventing people from getting the help they desperately need.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Myths and the continuum. 2. The workplace impact. 3. The diagnostic bottleneck. 4. Enter AI-powered screening. And finally, 5. AI performance and results. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. Myths and the Continuum.
First up, we really need to lay the groundwork and completely dismantle some of those traditional misunderstandings about mental well-being. The reality is that mental health is a continuum. It fluctuates based on this massive, tangled web of factors: your biological makeup, life experiences like trauma, your environment, the whole shebang. In fact, data from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services estimates that only about 17% of adults are in a state of optimal mental health at any given time. Think about that. That means the vast majority of us are navigating various degrees of stress, anxiety, or illness literally right now.
Notice how our baseline naturally slides across this continuum. We generally start over in the healthy zone, experiencing normal mood fluctuations, staying fairly calm, maintaining good energy. But, well, life happens, right? And we might shift into reacting, feeling nervous, maybe irritable, or just having trouble sleeping. Now, if left unaddressed, this can easily slide into the injured phase, marked by pervasive anger or restless sleep, and ultimately drop into the ill phase, where we see total exhaustion, severe depressed moods, and even physical illness. It's a gradual shift. It is definitely not a sudden flip of a switch.
And because it's a continuum, the language we use to talk about it matters immensely. We absolutely must practice person-first language. Look at it this way. You wouldn't say, "I am cancer," so we really shouldn't label someone as a schizophrenic or a bipolar. Instead, we use phrasing like a person living with mental illness. Separating the individual from the diagnosis is literally the very first step in breaking down that stubborn stigma that keeps people from asking for help.
Section 2. The workplace impact.
Now that we have a grasp on the continuum, let's shift our focus to the real-world scale of this issue, specifically looking at how these conditions impact our workforce. Let's anchor this in the data for a second. Between 30 and 50% of adults in the U.S. will experience a mental illness at some point in their lives. Now, pair that with the fact that 63% of Americans participate in the labor force. That overlap is massive. The workplace isn't just a place we go to earn a paycheck anymore. It is arguably the most critical environment for identifying and addressing mental health challenges. But here is a truly shocking reality. On average, adults living with a mental illness suffer for 10 years or more before they ever receive treatment. 10 years. Let that sink in. That is a full decade of navigating that injured or ill phase of the continuum completely without professional support. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer, unbelievable scale of the problem. 70% of adults with mental illness simply do not receive the services they need. This massive treatment gap leads to higher absenteeism, way lower productivity, and, worst of all, profound personal suffering. We have a serious crisis on our hands, and it absolutely demands a scalable solution.
Section 3. The diagnostic bottleneck.
Which brings us to the core obstacle. Why are so many people slipping through the cracks of our medical system? Well, in primary care settings, which, let's face it, are often the front line for catching these issues, providers actually miss or misidentify depression or anxiety in over 60% of cases. Over 60%? And to be fair, this isn't necessarily the fault of the doctors. It's a structural problem. They have limited time, limited resources, and they often have to rely entirely on what a patient is willing or even able to self-report during a quick 15-minute visit.
Think about those traditional diagnostic methods. They rely heavily on subjective self-report questionnaires. Those clipboards in the waiting room, they are highly vulnerable to memory bias and, frankly, our natural human desire to just look good in front of the doctor. Now contrast that with the emerging potential of large language model, or LLM AI methods.
AI doesn't rely on you subjectively checking boxes. It can literally analyze the natural flow of your conversation, offering this incredibly objective, highly scalable way to detect subtle linguistic cues that human ears almost always miss.
Section 4. Enter AI-powered screening. All right, this is where our story shifts. We're moving from the empathetic reality of human struggle into the highly analytical, super optimistic realm of technological solutions. A totally groundbreaking study out of Kent State University decided to put this exact idea to the test. And they didn't just use, curated social media posts or anything like that. They took a data set of over 500 verbatim transcripts from real-world auto-recorded clinical interviews. They then fed these natural conversational transcripts directly into various AI language models. The ultimate goal? To see if the AI could successfully predict multiple downstream diagnoses, specifically major depressive episodes, PTSD, and anxiety disorders.
To ensure their results were completely rigorous, the researchers actually tested 3 distinct AI methodologies. Method 1 used out-of-the-box models, think GPT 4.1 Mini and Meta Llama, with zero-shot prompting. That basically means the AI had no prior specific training on this medical task. Method 2 got a bit fancier. They fine-tuned those models using a technique called LoRa, which efficiently adapts the AI to medical discourse. And Method 3 used raw encoder-based models like Roberta to create complex mathematical embeddings of the text. Basically, they threw every kind of AI architecture at this problem just to see what stuck.
Now, what's really interesting about this setup is the prompt they used for the zero-shot models. It is surprisingly simple. They fed the AI the interview transcript and explicitly instructed it, do not include any reasoning or explanation. Respond with a single-line binary decision, prediction yes or prediction no. By forcing the AI into this super rigid binary format, they stripped away any chance of the AI hallucinating complex medical jargon, which resulted in a really clean, clinically interpretable signal.
Section 5. AI Performance and Results.
So the big question, how did the machines actually do? Let's move into our final analytical phase to uncover how well these AI models performed against those human baselines we talked about earlier. But wait, before we look at the raw numbers, we really have to understand the trade-offs narrative in medical testing. Specifically, we need to talk about the concept of recall. Recall is clinical sensitivity. I want you to think of it like an early warning radar. In mental health, having high recall is often way more important than having perfect pinpoint accuracy. Why? Well, because a false alarm just leads to a follow-up conversation with a doctor. No big deal. But a missed case? A false negative? That means someone suffers in silence for another decade. We want that radar to catch absolutely everyone who needs care.
And the results showed some truly fascinating differences between the AI models. GPT 4.1 had super high overall accuracy but terrible recall, meaning it was precise, but it completely missed actual positive cases. Llama 3 had the exact opposite problem. It had incredible recall, but really low accuracy. Basically, it flagged almost everyone, creating way too many false alarms. But those fine-tuned Roberta models, man, they hit the absolute sweet spot. They provided a beautifully balanced performance that was highly sensitive without overwhelming the whole system with false positives.
The key achievements of this study are just staggering. Across the different diagnostic categories, the models achieved over 80% accuracy. But most incredibly, for PTSD, the models hit up to a 98% recall rate. 98%. The AI caught almost every single true case of PTSD literally just by analyzing the text of a natural conversation. They also found something really cool. Feeding the AI shorter, more focused chunks of text actually improved its sensitivity to subtle narrative cues. The AI is literally catching the nuances that our completely overwhelmed primary care doctors are, understandably, missing.
So the crucial point here is summarized perfectly by the researchers themselves. They state that these LLM-based models offer substantial improvements over traditional self-report screening tools. We are genuinely looking at a real, highly viable path toward low-barrier, AI-powered early diagnosis. Just imagine a world where a brief, natural conversation recorded on your phone could flag an anxiety disorder years before it derails your career or your life.
We started off today by looking at the human cost, right? The 70% of people slipping right through the cracks. And we've just seen how these algorithms can read the subtle cues of our struggles with a level of sensitivity that is almost hard to believe. So I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. As technology and empathy continue to merge in these unexpected ways, could a simple, natural conversation with an AI be the exact key we need to finally close the mental health treatment gap? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.